You know that feeling when you're just buried under articles, reports, all these notes, trying to get your head around some huge global issue, and you just wish someone could, I don't know, just boil it down to the absolute core for you.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Well, that's pretty much what we're aiming for here today. We're doing a deep dive into a really crucial area, American defense strategy, especially now the world's changing so fast. Our main guide for this is Elbridge Colby's book, The Strategy of Denial. It's made quite an impact.
It certainly has. It lays out a very distinct framework.
Right. And our mission today is basically to unpack that framework Colby proposes. You know, how can the United States protect its vital interests now in this age of great power competition?
Especially with China's rise. That's central to his argument.
Exactly. And all while trying to achieve what he calls a decent peace. So let's get into it.
Okay, so Colby starts off making a really clear point, and it kind of sets the stage for everything else. He argues that the world has just fundamentally changed. That period after the Cold War, the unipolar moment.
Where the U.S. was the undisputed top dog.
Right. That's gone. Simply over.
And the main reason for that huge shift, according to the book, is China. The rise of China.
Absolutely. It's transformative, as you said.
I mean, think about it. For the first time since, the 19th century, the U.S. doesn't clearly have the world's biggest economy anymore.
Not if you measure it by purchasing power parity, yeah.
Which is, basically adjusting for what your money actually buys in different places.
Yeah.
By that measure, China's economy is bigger.
And that's a massive shift. It changes the whole economic gravity of the world.
It's not just the economy either. The military side is just as stark, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. The defense spending figures Colby cites are, eye-opening. Like, 10 years ago, the U.S. spent more on defense than the next 18 countries combined.
18, wow.
Today, it's more like the next 7 combined. Still huge, obviously, but the gap has shrunk dramatically.
And China's role in that?
China's shot up to second place. They've been increasing their defense budget by about 10% pretty much every year for the last 25 years.
25 years of compound growth like that. It adds up.
It really does.
Yeah.
So this talk of a return to great power competition, it's not just a buzzword. It's almost a physical reality now. China's sheer size, its growing sophistication, its rise is arguably the defining feature of this new era.
Okay, so the unipolar moment's gone. China's risen significantly. What's the biggest problem this creates for U.S. strategy, according to Colby? Is it just needing more ships or planes, or is it deeper?
It's deeper. Colby argues the real problem, the core issue, is the absence of a clear strategic framework. Back in that unipolar time, the U.S. had so much power, it could kind of afford to make mistakes, strategically speaking. Its power acted like a buffer.
Right, there wasn't another power strong enough to really exploit those mistakes.
Exactly. But now, power is much more spread out. The U.S. can't rely on that buffer anymore. It needs a really comprehensive, rigorous, and sound framework for its defense strategy. Urgently.
And what's fascinating here, as you pointed out earlier, is how the sheer scale of China's growth, both economically and militarily, just completely resets the global chessboard. It forces a rethink. And the book really stresses that strategy isn't some master plan, right? Not a script for every eventuality.
No, not at all. He defines it differently. It's a simplifying logic.
A simplifying logic.
Right.
Okay. What does that mean in practice?
It means it's a way to cut through the complexity, the chaos of world events. It helps you figure out what's really important, where you absolutely have to focus your limited resources, time, money, attention.
And just as importantly, what you can maybe manage differently or even, dare I say it, ignore.
Precisely. It's a crucial distinction, especially when resources aren't infinite. You can't be everywhere doing everything. You need priorities.
Okay. So if the strategy is about prioritizing, what does Colby identify as the absolute top priority? The core problem the U.S. needs to solve.
He's very clear on this. The fundamental U.S. interest, the bottom line, is preventing any other single state from achieving regional hegemony.
Hegemony. Let's unpack that word a bit. It means more than just being powerful, right?
Right. It means predominance, real authority over a region, and the ability to basically extract benefits from that dominance, control, essentially.
And why should this matter to, someone listening? Why is preventing regional hegemony, say in Asia, so important for the U.S.?
Well, Colby argues it's incredibly direct. If a state like China, for instance, were to dominate a huge economic area like Asia, it would gain enormous leverage. It could potentially weaken the U.S. by shutting it out of key markets, which would hit American prosperity and power.
And it would give Beijing way more influence over global events, shaping them to its own advantage.
Exactly. The decision whether or not to respect U.S. interests would be Beijing's choice. And the book suggests, well, they might very well choose not to.
So which regions are we talking about? Where is this potential threat of hegemony most critical?
Colby ranks them. Asia is number one, by far. It represents something like 40% of global GDP, maybe two-thirds of global growth. The economies there are already collectively larger than the U.S., and they're getting more advanced all the time.
Okay, so Asia is paramount. What's next?
Europe comes next, about a quarter of global GDP. But the situation there is different. Unlike in Asia, there's no single European state that looks like it could realistically bid for hegemony. And Russia, despite its history and actions.
Its economy just isn't big enough to support that kind of ambition long term.
Almost certainly not, according to Colby. Its economic base is just too small compared to the rest of Europe, let alone the U.S. or China.
And other regions. The Middle East, Africa, South America.
The book argues they don't demand the same level of intense U.S. strategic focus, at least not in terms of preventing regional hegemony by a single power. The stakes are highest in Asia than Europe.
Now, Colby connects this focus on preventing hegemony back through U.S. history, doesn't he? He argues it's not really a new thing.
Yes, exactly. He pushes back against the simple narrative of America shifting from isolationism to internationalism. He argues that deep U.S. engagement abroad, historically, has almost always been driven by the need to stop another power from dominating a region vital to U.S. interests.
Like stepping into Europe after World War II.
Precisely. When Britain and France clearly couldn't contain the Soviet Union's potential bid for European hegemony on their own, the U.S. committed long-term.
So it frames U.S. foreign policy as more consistent over time than we might think. Always about maintaining a certain balance.
A balance of power, yes, which leads directly to his proposed solution.
Okay, so if preventing regional hegemony is the goal, how do you actually do it? What's the mechanism?
The core mechanism is maintaining favorable regional balances of power. And you do that by forming what Colby calls anti-hegemonic coalitions. Basically, getting enough states in a key region or active in that region to team up so their combined power outweighs the aspiring hegemon.
And the logic is that states naturally don't want to be dominated. They value their independence.
Exactly. Hegemony threatens their autonomy, their freedom of action, so they have a built-in incentive to cooperate to resist it.
But it sounds like a tricky choice for those states. They face this dilemma, right? Join the resistance, what he calls balancing, but risk angering the big power.
Yes, that's the balancing option, risking exposure to the aspirant's power.
Or take the seemingly safer route, accommodate the rising power. Bandwagoning, as you called it earlier.
Right, bandwagoning. And leaders in those countries have to weigh the costs and benefits, naturally, especially how vulnerable they are to military force.
Which brings us back to military power. Colby really emphasizes its role, doesn't he? Even within these coalitions that involve economics and diplomacy.
He does. He argues that while all elements of national power matter, economic ties, soft power, diplomacy, all of it, the regional balance ultimately comes down to military power. Force, he stresses, is the foundational form of power. It's the ultimate arbiter when push comes to shove.
So while diplomacy and economics are crucial for building and maintaining the coalition,
they rest on a bedrock of credible military capability. Without that military counterweight, the coalition's resistance might just collapse under pressure.
Okay, and in Asia specifically, given China's power, what role does the U.S. need to play in this coalition building?
Colby argues the U.S. role is indispensable. He calls it the external cornerstone balancer.
External cornerstone balancer, meaning?
Meaning that a strong, effective, anti-hegemonic coalition against China in Asia is probably unlikely to form or hold together without active U.S. participation and, crucially, its military power.
So the U.S. isn't just another member of the team.
It's the linchpin, the piece that makes the whole structure stable and credible, especially militarily. Without the U.S., other regional powers might feel they have no choice but to bandwagon with China.
It empowers them to choose resistance instead.
That's the idea. It provides the security and confidence for them to balance.
Okay, so that's the U.S. goal and strategy.
Yeah.
What about China's strategy from Colby's perspective? How would a rational China pursue hegemony if faced with this kind of potential coalition?
Colby suggests China's best bet, especially when facing a potentially stronger coalition, isn't necessarily a giant all-out war. Instead, it's what he calls a focused and sequential strategy.
Focused and sequential, meaning taking things one step at a time.
Exactly. Deliberately targeting individual coalition members or potential members one by one, picking them off, essentially. The aim is to weaken the coalition progressively, shift the balance bit by bit, without triggering that big systemic war it might lose, at least initially.
Okay, and what kind of limited military actions fit this strategy?
He discusses two main types. First, there's the punishment approach, or cost imposition.
Like blockades, sanctions, cyber attacks maybe. Things designed to inflict pain.
Yes, inducing a vulnerable state to give in by making life difficult, imposing losses.
But Colby points out weaknesses there too, right? It might not work if you're asking a country to give up something really core like its autonomy.
Precisely. And it's less effective if the target is getting support from the coalition. Plus, if China pushes too hard with punishment, it can backfire.
How so?
It risks making China look overly aggressive, even malign, potentially strengthening the resolve of the rest of the coalition.
Okay, so punishment has limits. What's the other option?
The other, and Colby argues potentially more effective, option for China is the conquest approach, specifically achieving a fait accompli.
Fait accompli, the French term, meaning an accomplished fact, a done deal.
Exactly. The idea is to seize and hold a target's key territory so quickly and decisively that it becomes incredibly difficult, costly, and risky for the defenders, the coalition, to reverse it.
So it's less about long-term occupation initially and more about creating a new reality on the ground.
Yes. It doesn't have to mean formal annexation right away. The seized territory becomes leverage.
Leverage to force political concessions, like breaking ties with the U.S., leaving the coalition.
That's the core idea. It's about shattering the coalition's cohesion and credibility by demonstrating overwhelming power in a limited, focused way.
Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The book flips the script on what we might assume China wants from military action. It's about strategic leverage through conquest, not just grabbing land.
Absolutely. It's a more nuanced view. The goal isn't just territory for territory's sake, but territory as a tool to achieve a larger strategic aim, breaking the opposing coalition and establishing dominance.
And the book identifies one target in particular as the most likely, or maybe most advantageous, initial target for this fait accompli strategy.
Yes, Taiwan.
Why Taiwan specifically? What makes it such a focal point?
Colby lays out several reasons. First, from Beijing's perspective, reunification with Taiwan is a core national goal, a political imperative for the CCP.
So there's a strong internal driver, but strategically.
Strategically, Taiwan is critical. Colby talks about differentiated credibility.
Meaning how the U.S. acts towards Taiwan signals its reliability to other allies.
Exactly. It's seen as the canary in the coal mine. If the U.S. commitment to Taiwan wavers or fails, it sends a powerful negative signal to Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, everyone.
And geographically.
Geographically, Taiwan sits right in the middle of that first island chain. It acts like a physical barrier, a cork in the bottle, hindering China's ability to project naval and air power out into the wider Pacific.
So controlling Taiwan would unblock that, give China direct access and new bases.
Precisely. It would fundamentally change the military geography of the region in China's favor.
Okay, so the stakes around Taiwan are incredibly high, according to this framework. How then should the U.S. respond? What's the recommended American strategy? The book is pretty blunt about one thing not being the answer.
Yeah, it's very clear. Trying to restore the kind of overwhelming U.S. military dominance that existed in the 1990s, that's simply infeasible.
Infeasible? Why? Just the scale of China now.
It's a combination of factors. China's huge and increasingly sophisticated economy, providing massive resources. Its decades-long focused investment in military capabilities designed specifically to counter U.S. strengths, especially near its own borders.
And geography too, right? The tyranny of distance for the U.S. versus proximity for China.
Exactly. Key allies are far from the U.S., but right next door to China. Trying to achieve dominance under those conditions would be incredibly expensive, maybe economically crippling.
And it could actually backfire, strain the very alliances you need.
Potentially, yes, if allies perceive the U.S. as pursuing an overly ambitious or risky strategy.
Okay, so if dominance is out, what is the best U.S. military strategy, according to Colby?
The best approach is what he terms a denial defense.
Denial defense. So not aiming to conquer China or destroy its military, but
aiming to deny China the ability to successfully use its military force to achieve its key political objectives. Specifically, preventing that fait accompli we talked about.
making it impossible, or at least incredibly difficult and costly, for China to seize and hold territory like Taiwan.
That's the core goal, either stopping the invasion before it succeeds or being able to eject the invaders quickly before they can dig in and consolidate their hold.
And that likely requires specific capabilities, like controlling the sea and air around the target.
Yes, achieving local sea and air control, at least temporarily, in the areas an invasion force would need to transit, is often critical for a denial defense.
And this ties into the idea of defensibility, doesn't it? Choosing allies and commitments wisely.
Absolutely. The U.S. needs to prioritize allies where an effective defense is actually feasible without completely draining U.S. resources or undermining its ability to meet other commitments.
So defending an ally shouldn't bankrupt your ability to defend others, essentially.
Right. It's about strategic solvency. And Colby argues that if the U.S. and its allies can configure their forces to deny China an invasion of Taiwan, they can almost certainly do the same for the Philippines or Japan, given the challenges involved with Taiwan.
Okay, denial defense is plan A. But what if it doesn't work? Or what if it looks like it won't work? Is there a plan B?
Yes. The fallback strategy Colby outlines is called a binding strategy.
Binding strategy. It sounds different. Less direct defense, more like strategic jujitsu, using China's own actions against it.
That's a good way to put it. It's less about stopping the initial attack head-on and more about shaping the consequences of that attack. The aim is to compel China to act in ways that inadvertently catalyze and strengthen the broader anti-hegemonic coalition, to basically force China to reveal its true, broader intentions.
Okay, how do you make an adversary reveal themselves like that? What are the mechanisms?
Colby points to a few ways China could be bound, as he puts it. First, through its aggressiveness. If U.S. forces are somewhat dispersed, maybe intertwined with allies, China might be tempted or feel compelled to strike more broadly than just the initial target to ensure success.
Hitting targets in multiple countries, for example.
Yes, which would immediately demonstrate its wider aggressive intent and likely galvanize more countries to join the fight against it.
Okay, what else? Ambition.
Right. If the initial denial efforts make easy gains impossible, China might be forced to pursue bigger, more ambitious objectives to achieve its aims, escalating its goals.
Which, again, makes it look more threatening to everyone else.
Exactly. Then there's cruelty.
Cruelty. How does that work strategically?
If U.S. and allied defenses are made more resilient, harder to hit precisely, China might resort to larger, less discriminate attacks. These could risk hitting civilian targets or causing widespread damage, making China appear cruel and losing it international support. Supporting insurgencies in any occupied territory could also force a heavy-handed and thus cruel-looking response from China.
And finally, he mentions undermining China's unreliability.
Yes, if the U.S. has operating agreements or bases across many regional states, China might be tempted to violate neutrality pledges it made to some of those states in order to strike U.S. assets.
Breaking its promises, showing it can't be trusted.
Correct. All these factors together create what Colby calls the boa constrictor effect.
The boa constrictor effect. That's a powerful image. Explain that.
It means the harder China tries to escalate its way out of the difficult situation created by the denial or binding strategy, the more it squeezes, the more it inadvertently tightens the ring of opponents around itself. It widens the circle of enemies and strengthens their resolve to resist.
So, escalating becomes counterproductive for China. It makes the situation worse for them, not better.
That's the dynamic the binding strategy seeks to create, making escalation look deeply unattractive, encouraging China to de-escalate, settle, or perhaps not even start the conflict in the first place.
Okay, this makes sense. It's about shaping the strategic environment. Now, central to both denial and binding are these coalitions. Who, specifically, should be in this U.S.-led defense perimeter in Asia? How does Colby suggest the U.S. decide?
The perimeter basically includes states where the U.S. has committed its credibility through a security guarantee, a formal alliance, or something close to it. The key criterion for including an ally is, do they, on balance, add more to the coalition's effectiveness than they drain from it?
So it's a strategic calculation. Who brings significant power or crucial geography?
Exactly. Obvious candidates are major powers like Japan, Australia, South Korea bringing economic might, capable militaries, good location.
And geographically crucial states.
Like the Philippines, sitting right on that first island chain. Or Pacific Island nations Palau, Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, providing strategic depth, dispersal options, places for logistics.
But the book also warns against overextension, right? Not every friendly nation needs a full U.S. treaty alliance.
Correct. Colby urges caution. Extending alliances forward is generally good for denial, but full commitments should be made conservatively. He mentions Thailand, for instance, as a country where a full alliance might be problematic, given its history of sometimes accommodating China and its exposure to Chinese land power.
So the key existing allies are clear: Japan, Australia, South Korea, and then the first island chain states like the Philippines and implicitly Taiwan are vital. What about India?
India is seen as absolutely critical. A huge power, shares a border with China, obvious strategic alignment potential. But Colby suggests India might not need or want a formal U.S. alliance guarantee to be an effective part of the anti-hegemonic coalition. Its own interests might be sufficient driver.
Okay, one last really big piece of the puzzle is simultaneity. How does the U.S. military prepare for other crises happening at the same time as, say, a major conflict in Asia over Taiwan?
This is a huge driver of military planning for size structure. Colby addresses several potential simultaneous challenges.
Like pandemics?
He argues pandemics are primarily a public health issue, not a core defense strategy driver in the same way. Requires different tools.
What about nuclear threats?
That's different. Nuclear deterrence is paramount, probably the most consequential direct threat to Americans. The U.S. needs a survivable, capable, and discriminate nuclear force, enough to ensure any potential attacker knows the costs of aggression would far outweigh any conceivable gains. That underpins everything else.
And counterterrorism, which dominated U.S. strategy for so long.
Colby argues for shifting to a more economical approach, less large-scale interventions, more enabling local partners, using lighter, more tailored capabilities. The goal is to free up major resources, high-end ships, aircraft, personnel for the great power competition, primarily with China.
So after setting aside pandemics and shifting counterterrorism, is there any other major conflict scenario the U.S. should realistically plan to handle simultaneously with a crisis in Asia?
The one Colby identifies as plausible and needing provision is a potential Russian attack on NATO allies in Eastern Europe.
Okay, Russia. That sounds like a major stretch, handling both China and Russia at once?
He argues it's manageable, though, for specific reasons. NATO countries, collectively, are far richer, larger, and potentially stronger than Russia. The key is increased European defense investment and adapting NATO's own posture to be able to deny a Russian fait accompli in Eastern Europe, largely with European forces, perhaps with some tailored U.S. help.
So the U.S. role in Europe shifts slightly to enabling European defense more rather than being the primary defender.
In essence, yes. Strengthen NATO's defense, signal restraint to Russia where possible, and ideally reduce Moscow's incentive to focus westward. Maybe even down the line, encourage Russia to see its interests as more aligned against potential Chinese hegemony. It's about smart resource allocation globally.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Stepping back, this deep dive really shows that navigating this new era, it demands a very clear-eyed, perhaps even tough-minded defense strategy.
It really does. One that acknowledges the power shifts, understands how alliances and credibility work, and crucially, doesn't shy away from the central role of military power in international politics.
And the ultimate goal, as Colby puts it, isn't dominance for its own sake or endless conflict. It's achieving a decent peace.
Exactly. A peace that's compatible with American freedom, security, and prosperity, but achieved at a cost and risk level that's actually sustainable for the country long term.
And connecting this back, the strategy described isn't really about wanting war. It sounds like it's about creating conditions where war becomes less likely.
That's a key takeaway. By making the costs and risks of aggression crystal clear, especially for a potential hegemon, you deter conflict. You make peace more stable.
Colby really pushes back against the idea that peace just happens, or that you get it by wishing away conflict.
Right. He argues peace is an achievement. It's something you build, often by rigorously thinking through what war would actually look like and being prepared for it, acting, in a sense, as if you're always on the brink.
It's not asking China to be something it isn't. Just
not a regional hegemon that dictates terms to everyone else. Coexistence as great powers, but within a balanced system.
So what does all this mean for you, our listener? I think it means understanding this kind of strategic thinking isn't just an academic exercise for policymakers.
No, it's about appreciating the really complex calculations that go into maintaining global stability, the kind of stability that ultimately underpins your own peace and security.
It's a reminder, perhaps, that peace isn't simply the absence of war. It's often the product of a very deliberate, very strategic effort to make war unthinkable, or at least unwinnable, for those who might be tempted to start it.